We are on the record. We are in the presence of the jury. Mr. Bahena is present along with the attorneys of record. The defense may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Brandon Bublitz.
Okay, sir, can I get you to step over here and I'll swear you in, and then you'll head right over there, okay? Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay? And again, you're seated, head right over there, okay? Defense may proceed.
Thank you. State your name, please.
Yes, Brandon Bublitz.
I was close, wasn't I?
Yes, sir.
I imagine you get that a lot.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of like freeze. Sir, how are you employed?
Let's have the witness spell his last name.
Sure. Spell your last name, please.
Yes, sir. Last name is Bublitz.
And again, how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation.
Do you have a current assignment?
Yes, sir. I am currently assigned to field operations, part of the major crime unit, kind of detached for firearms, fire weapons cases.
We've heard about different zones that agents cover in the major crimes unit. Are you assigned a certain zone?
At the time of this case, I was assigned to a certain zone, specifically in Zone 4. Since then, I've been reassigned to the Des Moines area, kind of focalized with Zone 1, which would be kind of the Des Moines area, and then weapons crimes throughout the entire state.
Okay, sure. What is Zone 4?
Yes, Zone 4 would be kind of the southeastern quadrant of the state of Iowa. The counties down here, I apologize, I won't be able to quote it right off the top of my head, the counties it covers.
Sure, the southeast quarter of the state's good enough. Briefly tell me your educational background.
Yes, so I have an Associate of Arts degree from Des Moines Area Community College and a Bachelor's of Science degree from Upper Iowa University.
In what discipline?
Public administration.
And what's your law enforcement background?
I started with the Department of Public Safety as a trooper in 2006. From there, I transferred around the state and was promoted to special agent with Major Crimes Unit in Cedar Rapids office, and that was roughly in 2016.
Have you yourself been involved in any investigations in the city of Dubuque?
Not off the top of my head, sir.
Very well. How many major crimes since you've come to this unit have you been involved in investigating?
Over the course of the 4 years, I would provide an estimate of 40 to 50 in assists.
Now, one of those cases you were assisting on was the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts, is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you recall when you were requested to assist?
I believe the date that I was requested to assist was July 24th, and the request would have came from, at the time, Special Agent in Charge Richard Ron.
I want to focus your activities. I know you did quite a bit of investigation in this case, but I want to focus your activities basically on two dates. July 31 being the first one. As I understand it, on July 31, you were assigned to collect some buccal swabs from an address in rural Poweshiek County. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir, I do.
Who assigned you to collect some buccal swabs?
The request to collect the buccal swabs came from the case agent in this case, Special Agent Trent Valletta.
And what was the address where you were going to collect those buccal swabs?
I don't recall the specific address off the top of my head. I apologize.
If I gave you the address 2384 460th Avenue, Guernsey, Iowa, would that sound right?
Yes, sir, that would sound correct.
And what was the significance of that address?
At the time the request came from Special Agent Trent Valletta, there was an FBI agent by the name of Special Agent Casey Max said at the location. He had done kind of a preliminary search of the property and came across some droplets that appeared to potentially be of blood.
Okay. So this is on 460th Avenue, right?
Yes, that is correct. It's the way the property sits. If I recall correctly, it's a very lengthy driveway to the back. So in this scenario, I used GPS coordinates to kind of track the location.
Sure. Were you still investigating the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts when her body was discovered?
Yes, I was, sir.
Did you go to the scene where Mollie Tibbetts' body was discovered?
Yes, I did, sir.
So, if you could tell the jury, how far was the 2384 460th Avenue address in terms of miles, feet, yards from where the body was ultimately discovered?
I apologize. I'm going to have a difficult time giving you an exact estimate, but I believe it would be kind of the next cross street. We would go through an intersection, travel up the road. I'm going to estimate approximately a mile, but again, that's a rough estimation on my behalf.
Did you collect those buccal swabs?
Yes, I did, sir.
And were those buccal swabs then turned over to Agent Villada?
Correct, sir. Those buccal swabs would have been entered as evidence in the case, transferred over to Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office for custodial reasons, and Special Agent Trent Villada would have been briefed as to the activities.
Okay, so how many swabs did you take?
In that scenario, I believe I collected 4 swabs, and the reason for the 4 was because the location of it was inside of the dirt, and so it was very difficult to try to get a clean swab. So in this scenario, there was multiple swabs that were taken.
Okay. So you take 4 swabs, collect them according to DCI protocol, make sure they're sealed and everything, correct?
Correct, sir.
And then you turn them over to the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office, right?
Correct.
After you do that, do you keep track of whether or not they've been tested or the results?
No, that would be part of the case agent's role in this scenario. I would go back, brief the case agent up, provide him the details associated to the location. This was a farm. It was kind of a feed lot. There was decaying cattle in close proximity to where this was at. All of this information would have been provided to the case agent, and the case agent from there would make the determination as to whether or not those are submitted to the lab for testing purposes.
From your training, education, experience, and looking at those 4 droplets or whatever you saw, could you tell if they were human blood versus animal blood?
No, sir, I would not be able to differentiate blood between one or the other. Looking at the totality of the circumstances in this scenario, with the large number of cattle, kind of on what I would describe a feeder lot, buildings that were in kind of a decay area, as well as cattle being in kind of a decomposition status nearby, I would likely be led to believe that it had something to do with the cattle, but I could not say that definitively, no.
Okay. Do you know if those buccal swabs were ever submitted after the discovery of Mollie Tibbetts' body?
I do not know, sir. I would have to refer to the case agent in this scenario.
Very well. I want to then move you forward a few days to August 2nd and your activities on August 2nd.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the date.
August 2nd. On August 2nd, 2018, I believe you were assigned to head back to 460th Avenue once again. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What was your assignment there?
In that scenario, I was assigned to try to provide a neighborhood canvass or do follow-up on neighborhood canvasses. We had identified residences that we've not had any contact with at that point in time, and so we were trying to do follow-up to make sure that we've had the opportunity to talk to everybody in the area that may or may not have seen anything.
One of those residences was 2410 460th Avenue, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you identify who the residents of that address were?
I don't recall right off the top of my head, sir, the name of the residents at that location. I don't believe I made contact with anybody at that location, if I recall correctly.
Who assigned you to do the canvass of that specific address?
In that scenario, that would have been Special Agent Trent Villada, the case agent.
Did you ever go back to interview the residents after August 2, 2018?
In this scenario, no. The follow-up, after the attempts were made and no contact was made, follow-up would have been provided by case agent Trent Villada. He would have dictated who would or would not have gone out to that scene after the fact.
Very well. You also noted there was a cemetery on 460th Avenue. you recall going to a cemetery?
Yes, sir, I do recall that.
And was there an interview done at the cemetery of an individual?
Yes, there was, sir. In this scenario, it was just happened to be I was driving through the area, saw the individual mowing the yard at that, or mowing the grass at that time. Uncertain as to whether or not anybody had had contact with this individual, but likely he was a local individual, so I stopped and had a brief conversation with the individual.
Did you identify this individual?
I don't recall right off the top of my head, but I do know he's been identified, sir.
If I gave you the name Darian Davis,
Yes, sir, that sounds correct.
did Mr. Davis give you any information?
No. Mr. Davis just provided that he really wasn't in that specific area at the time, and there was really no actionable information provided by him in this scenario.
Did Mr. Davis inform you that he also mowed the cemetery in Brooklyn?
I don't recall if we had that conversation or not, sir.
Okay, very well. That's all I have. Thank you.
State may cross-examine.
Agent Bublitz, when were you called in to assist in the investigation of Mollie Tibbetts' disappearance?
I believe July 24th is the date that I was requested to assist in this scenario.
And did you continuously work on this case for a number of days or even weeks?
Yes, sir, I did. From approximately start to finish, there was just a few days where I was detached to assist in other cases. Otherwise, I was dedicated to this case.
All right. The area of blood that you located on 460th, can you describe with any more specificity as to where that was located in relation to the feedlot that you meant, or the cattle operation, whatever that was near there?
Yes, sir. So it's challenging without trying to draw it out for everybody, but in this scenario, what we would have is you pulled up a drive. It's kind of an arched drive. If you followed that straight back, it would take you to a fence, and on the backside of that fence is the feedlot with numerous cattle inside of it. But as we stepped forward approximately 25, 30 feet, you could see tractor marks and tires through there. But inside of one of the depressions was some blood, or what appeared to be blood. But if I was to stand on top of where that blood was at, approximately 20 to 30 feet, kind of to the south from where we're at there, was cattle that were kind of in a decomp state. So it was all in relative close proximity to each other.
And you associated that blood area with the cattle that were dead that you observed?
Yes, sir, that's what I believe in this scenario.
Were there other people that were working at the farm operation or feedlot? Or did you observe any?
No, sir. Prior to my arrival, Special Agent Casey Maxted had the opportunity to talk with the owner of the property and received written consent to collect the buccal swab at that time. I didn't have the opportunity to stand and talk with the owner himself, but the other special agent that had talked with him also did a search of the property. So I kind of relied upon what he had said and focused really on the collection of the buccal swabs at that time.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes. Agent, were these decomposing cattle and this cattle lot there when Special Agent Casey Maxted asked for the buccal swabs to be taken?
Yes, sir, they would have been.
And Special Agent Casey Maxted is with the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
Correct, sir.
And it was Agent Maxted who made the request?
I believe he made the request to Special Agent Trent Valletta, who in turn made the request to me, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Anything else, Mr. Brown?
Nothing else.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Step
Your Honor.
down, you're excused. Defense may call its next witness.
Your Honor, defense calls Matt George.
Sir, do you want to step up here and I'll swear you in? Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Make your way right over there to be seated, if you would, please.
State your name, please.
My name is Matthew George.
And sir, how are you employed?
I'm an agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation.
How long have you held that position?
I've been with the DCI for just under 26 years.
Can you tell me your law enforcement background prior to that?
Sure. Well, I was an agent. Being an agent with the DCI was my first law enforcement job. Prior to that, I went to school, got a criminology degree, was trained up in Minnesota to be a police officer up there. But before I actually got a job there, I came to Iowa and joined our department as a member of the DCI right away.
What is your, as far as being an agent, you're with the Major Crimes Unit, correct?
I was for a period of time, yes, sir.
What's your current assignment?
I'm an agent with our Special Enforcement Bureau, our Gambling Bureau.
Okay. How long were you with the Major Crimes Unit?
Just under 16 years.
And what area of the state did you cover?
I covered the southeastern part of the state, about 20 counties, along with other agents.
Okay. There were times you would be asked to assist in other areas of the state as well?
Yes.
Did other areas of the state ever include, in the last couple of years, Dubuque, Iowa?
Dubuque, Iowa?
Yes.
Likely.
Okay. Now, in those 16 years, did you ever serve as a case agent on any homicides?
Yes.
Tell the jury briefly what the role of a case agent is.
The role of a case agent is to, the way the DCI is set up, is that we assist local agencies. Could be a police department, a sheriff's office, with major crimes. It could be a homicide, kidnappings, major cases. And oftentimes these local jurisdictions may not have their own detective bureau, or if they do, they need extra help. So the DCI comes in to assist that local agency. Oftentimes we partner up with a local detective if they have one. If not, we run the case ourselves with their assistance when possible. The role of the case agent is to manage the case, is to work with controlling leads, assigning leads to other detectives, trying to move the case in the right direction. It's your job as the lead agent to manage that case from start to finish.
Is the role of the case agent to kind of manage the collection of data in a case?
Well, you could manage it yourself depending upon the case. If it's a smaller case, if it's a larger case, you would likely assign that lead to someone else while you can focus on other priorities as well. So it just depends upon the case you're working.
But the idea of the case agent is to make sure that whoever you're supervising or assisting is out there collecting as much data as possible so an informed decision can be made if charges are going to be made. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, yes.
Thanks. You ever heard the term victimology?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Victimology means to me, when we're working a case and we have identified a victim, who that person is. For example, are they educated? Are they not educated? Are they employed? Are they not employed? Who are their friends? Who is their inner circle? What kinds of habits do they have? What do they do socially? What makes them tick? Just everything you can get about a person would be considered part of their victimology.
And what purpose does that serve?
Well, it can serve a lot of purposes. One, just to get to know that person, and through the victimology, it also creates potential investigative leads for that particular case.
You mentioned just a minute ago getting to know the victim's inner circle. What's the relevance of that?
Well, the relevance is, again, just to generate leads, interviews, talking to people, trying to figure out what happened, just trying to get as much information about that person as you can. And a lot of times you start with that inner circle of friends or family or associates.
In your training and experience, that inner circle, when you have violent crimes, provides you a lot of times witnesses, correct?
Say that again, please.
That inner circle many times in your training and experience provides you with valuable witnesses, does it not?
It can.
Many times provides you with the assailant, doesn't it?
It can.
More often than not?
It just depends upon the case, but I couldn't give you a percentage, but certainly it would be a fair statement that it does develop persons of interest.
Sure. I believe in this case you were asked to help investigate the death of Mollie Tibbetts, right?
I was.
And initially it was the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
Right.
And I've been afforded a number of your recorded interviews, and you used the term working a case inside out. Do you recall using that term?
I do.
Is that a term you typically use?
It's not a term that I typically use, no.
What do you mean when you say you're working a case inside out?
Well, if I'm remembering what you're referring to, again, it's going back to talking to people that are close to the victim, in this case, Mollie Tibbetts, talking to boyfriend, family, kind of working your way out, trying to get to know Mollie better.
What do you expect to learn from those closest to, in this case, Mollie Tibbetts?
Again, just going back to the victimology, trying to learn her habits, her routine, what she does on a day-to-day basis, problems she may have been having with people, things of that nature. You never know what you're going to get as you do these interviews. That's why we do them, just to try to get as much information as we can.
Is it your experience that those people closest to someone who's a victim or someone who's disappeared, that those closest to her know someone's routines and know what makes that person tick, as a rule?
I think that's a fair statement.
If someone doesn't have a fair recollection of, in this case, Mollie Tibbetts' habits or routines or things of that nature, does that throw up a red flag for you in your training and experience?
I'm going to object. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
If someone in your training and experience in that inner circle of Mollie Tibbetts' world gives you conflicting stories, does that cause you pause for concern as an investigator?
Objections. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
When you are interviewing people closest to someone who's a victim, what kind of physical evidence do you like to collect?
From that person that we're interviewing?
Yes.
It just depends upon the type of case that we're working, I guess.
Would you like to collect DNA?
Depending upon the case, that would be something that we would consider, certainly.
Okay. Give me your definition of a crime scene.
My definition of a crime scene?
Yes.
Well, I guess in general terms, it's a location. It could be outside, inside, a car, wherever. We'll just use the example where a body is located. That area would be considered a crime scene. There can be a primary crime scene, a secondary crime scene, but generally speaking, a crime scene is a location where there is potential evidence of a crime.
Can you agree with me that a crime can occur in one place and a body be located in another place?
Yes.
Okay. How do we determine if we have just a location of a body versus where a crime may have occurred?
How do we know? How can we tell the difference?
Yes.
Depending upon the type of case, I guess we could use the example of a violent death, just in general.
Sure.
We may have a body located in a ditch somewhere, and that body has lots of trauma. Could be a gunshot, could be a knife wound, whatever the case may be. Lots of trauma, lots of blood on the person, but potentially maybe, for example, not a lot of blood around that body. Okay. You would start to think that perhaps the body was dumped out of a car to get into the ditch, so there could be a secondary crime scene in this scenario of possibly a vehicle. That would be a...
Very well. Have you worked cases where forensic examination of computers and phone technology have been used?
Yes.
Why is forensic examination of computer technology, cell phones, things of that nature important in this day and age?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. I'm certainly not a computer expert, but computer devices, whether it's a computer, smartphones, things of that nature, store data, and that data, whether it's photographs, text messages, communications, GPS coordinates, and a whole host of other things, can be very useful in a criminal investigation.
So when you're working a case inside out, when you're looking at victimology, do you use forensic examination of the victim's phone, computer, things like that to build your victimology?
You certainly could, and oftentimes that is done, yes.
How is that done?
Well, we have a computer forensics unit of trained agents that are trained to examine computers. They're trained to download data from cell phones, and they extract the data, and then that data is reviewed at some point in time.
In your training and your experience, is that something you would also deem important in a case where an individual has disappeared?
Yes.
You have testified in the past regarding the importance of someone's digital footprint, right?
I have.
Tell us what a dead zone is.
A dead zone would be a period of time. For example, if I have a cell phone and we have records from my cell phone, and let's say there's a period of time between, let's say there's a lot of activity on my phone leading up to midnight, and then there's no activity on my phone, like outgoing phone calls from me, for example, until 12:15 a.m., and then I continue on making a lot of phone calls and text messages. That 15-minute window from midnight to 12:15 a.m., where there's no activity from me, would be considered, I guess, a dead zone within those records.
And when you're investigating forensic examinations and looking at a case, you look for those dead zones, do you not?
At times it can be important.
Okay. When were you asked to assist in the investigation of the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts?
I believe I first responded over to Brooklyn, Iowa on or about the 23rd of July.
And did you assist in the investigation of Mollie Tibbetts' disappearance until her body was discovered?
Off and on, not constantly, but I was over there for periods of time, and then a small break, then back again over the course of that period of time, yes.
Seems like you were wearing a lot of different hats during this investigation. You were interviewing, conducting canvasses, things of that nature, right?
Yeah, we all were, yes, sir.
But you conducted a lot of interviews. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
Do you know how many interviews you conducted?
I do not.
Can you tell me if the interviews you conducted, were they all recorded?
I would say the majority of them were. If they weren't, that would have been reflected in the report. For example, if we did a canvas at a house or a roadside canvas, some of those interviews may not have been recorded, but sit-down interviews would have been recorded, yes.
Is that your practice, to do a sit-down interview and record it?
That's my practice, if I can, generally speaking. Maybe not always, but generally speaking.
And would you agree with me that's the best practice for a law enforcement officer?
Well, it certainly is for me. I can't speak for everyone.
Why is it for you?
For me, it's good to be able to go back and listen to the recording to make sure you get it right, that you heard things right.
Have you ever interviewed a non-English speaking individual?
Nothing's coming to mind right now. I've interviewed folks, I believe, in the past that perhaps they had trouble speaking English, but I can't remember a time having to use an interpreter. I can't say that ever hasn't happened, but nothing's coming to mind right now.
So in all your years of serving as an agent with the DCI, you've never had a case where you've interviewed a non-English speaking witness or defendant?
I can't say that that's never happened, but as I sit here right now, I can't think of a time. That's not to say that I haven't, or certainly haven't interviewed people where there was maybe a communication barrier. Perhaps English wasn't their first language, but I can't recall having to use an interpreter. I could be corrected on that.
Have you served as case agent where you directed other agents or officers to interview non-English speakers?
As I sit here right now, I can't think of a time.
In your experience as a case agent and as an investigating agent, give me an idea of how many interviews you think you've conducted.
Hundreds. I mean, I don't know if I would want to say thousands, but hundreds of interviews.
There's a lot of technology and a lot of agents lent to this investigation of Mollie Tibbetts. Is that a fair statement?
A lot of technology lent?
Yes.
Yes.
What kind of technology was being used that you saw during this investigation?
Well, I wasn't really involved in the technology part of it that much. There were people that are much smarter than me in the technology side of things that were dealing with that. Definitely, cell phone dumps, cell phone extractions were being used during interviews that I was helping to conduct. For example, we would interview a person, their cell phone was taken from them through consent, the data was extracted, the phone was given back to them. Those types of things were done. But there were also other things going on that I'm not completely aware of. But there was a lot of tracking of cell phones and different, I'll just say GPS, for lack of better words, that type of technology trying to figure things out. But other people that were specialized in that were taking care of that part of it.
There were drones up in the air helping to search for Mollie, right?
I believe that's the case, yes, sir.
Okay. Sir, were you present in Brooklyn for a press conference that was held on July 25th, 2018, where Sheriff Tom Kriegel declared that...
Sorry to interrupt you. This is not relevant. It also is going to call for hearsay if he's going to testify to what Sheriff Tom Kriegel said.
Well, here's what we'll do. Before I rule one way or the other, Mr. Freeze, why don't you go ahead and finish the question?
Were you present for a press conference in Poweshiek County where Poweshiek County Deputy Sheriff, or Poweshiek County Sheriff Tom Kriegel declared that Dalton Jack had been cleared of the investigation on July 25, 2018?
Would withdraw our objection.
And again, just for clarification purposes, this calls for a yes/no answer at this point.
I was at a press conference. Your Honor, I'm not sure I can answer this yes or no.
Okay. Give your best answer.
Yes, sir. I recall being at a press conference outside the sheriff's office on a particular day when various people from our office from Des Moines were there, as I'm recalling this. And I want to say that had to do more with the resolution of the case in general. But specifically your question, I don't remember that right now. I'm not saying that I wasn't there for it, but that part I don't remember.
Were you aware that Dalton Jack had been publicly cleared as of July 25, 2018?
Publicly cleared?
Yes.
As I sit here right now, no.
Did you ever interview Dalton Jack?
I did.
What was the purpose of that interview?
Going back to what we talked about before, talking to, in this case, he is Mollie's boyfriend, trying to get information from him about Mollie, their relationship, starting that victimology that we talked about before.
Okay. The first interview of Dalton Jack, do you recall when it occurred?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe that was on July 25th.
And what time of day did that occur?
I don't exactly remember.
Where did it occur?
At the fire departments in Brooklyn?
And was Mr. Jack cooperative?
Yes.
Describe his demeanor.
Obviously, his demeanor seemed fine. He was talkative. He was concerned, obviously, with, hey, where's his girlfriend? Where's Mollie? So very concerned, able to have a conversation. Didn't seem, very emotional. It was just it was a conversation, but he was concerned about, his girlfriend.
Was it important for your investigation to get facts from Mr. Jack so you could potentially find Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes.
Okay, you were focused solely on the investigation at this point in time in talking to Mr. Jack, right?
Well, yes, I was interviewing him as part of the investigation. At this point, we didn't know where Mollie was, so we were hoping that he would help us, figure something out or give us some information that would be of some use.
Did Mr. Jack detail to you his activities in the days leading up to Mollie's disappearance?
He did.
Was he able to give you a timeline?
He was.
Do you recall what that timeline was?
Judge, I'm going to object. This is hearsay. Dalton Jack's testified. This is not impeachment.
You chose to.
It's not. This is hearsay.
It's the effect on the listener. It's a non-hearsay purpose, Your Honor.
They're offering it for its truth, clearly.
Objections overruled. Witness may answer if he knows.
Could you repeat the question, sir?
Can you read it back, please?
Do you recall what that timeline was?
So the timeline leading up to
Yes.
the disappearance. My recollection is that Dalton was working with a work crew. I'll call it a bridge crew up in the Dubuque area, and he was up there, as I recall, on the 17th of July, and eventually came back to the Poweshiek County area. I believe he said on the 19th.
Did he tell you he was working there on July 16? The Monday?
I'd have to look at my.
Hang on. We object to going blow by blow through the interview. It's hearsay. The only purpose this witness could be used is for impeachment purposes. This is not proper. It's hearsay, and we would object.
Question asked for a yes or no answer.
Objections overruled with the understanding that the parameters of the question.
Your Honor, I'll have to expand a little bit beyond a yes or no.
Go ahead.
It's my recollection in reviewing the interview report that he was up there on the 17th. I'd have to review the report to see if we talked about the 16th.
Was it important in your investigation to know his activities on the 17th and 18th and then the 19th as well?
Sure.
And why is that?
Again, just trying to figure out where people are, trying to establish alibis of different people.
And did Mr. Jack explain that to you? The specific activities of those dates?
Yes, he did.
Please tell us what you learned.
I'm going to object. Again, this is hearsay.
Overruled. Witness may answer.
Well, he talked about being up in Dubuque, again, I believe on the 17th, working with this work crew on a bridge, the bridge that goes from Dubuque over to Wisconsin. And I don't remember exactly what his hours were, but most of the day he would work on the bridge, and then at night he and the other crew members would stay at a local hotel up in Dubuque, and next day kind of repeat same.
Was it important to your investigation to pinpoint what he was doing during the time where Mollie Tibbetts would have been abducted?
That would be important, although I was not part of that with this investigation.
Okay. That was on July 25th, right?
Yes.
Did you speak to Mr. Jack again on July 26th?
On the 26th?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
And on July 26th, you spoke to him and said you wanted to interview him again. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
Why did you want to speak to him again on the 27th?
Just to get more information, more details.
Were there, had you learned additional information that you needed clarification on?
I can't specifically remember that as I sit here. It's not uncommon to re-interview people once, twice, even additional times.
Okay. The interview on the 27th, who was present with you?
I was there along with an agent with the FBI.
Now, was that interview just a rehashing of the first interview, or were there additional facts that you wanted to explore?
Yeah, there were additional facts at that point that I wanted to explore.
Okay. What were those facts you wanted to explore?
On the 27th, we learned that Dalton had a relationship with another girl, and that had not been previously discussed with me during our first time together. So I wanted to kind of go over, among other things, that part of it.
Did you deem the fact that Dalton had a relationship with another girl a fact that you would want to know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought it was of interest, and certainly I wanted to know if there's anything else that we hadn't discussed or what else was missing.
Okay. Why would that be something you want to know?
In terms of a relationship that he was having?
Yeah.
Well, just in general, during this part of the investigation, we're wanting to get as much information as we can from a person. In this particular instance, from Dalton Jack, and just a complete outpouring of information, and that would include relationships that he may have had that could have caused, in this particular case, maybe a problem in their relationship with Mollie, and to explore, hey, are there any other things that we haven't talked about? Now is the time. So just getting a better, more solid statement from him concerning he and Mollie's relationship.
He and Mollie's relationship was relevant to you?
Sure.
Why?
Well, like any case, but in this particular case, are they arguing? Are they fighting? Those are the types of things that we would want to know. If they're fighting, who else knows about the fighting? That could generate other leads. Hey, you just never know how far out the spider web can go with information, especially when people are fighting. Are they going to talk to their best friend or those types of things? It's just very important to get a good understanding of a person's relationship with their significant other.
How did Mr. Jack characterize his relationship with Mollie Tibbetts?
Well, at that particular time on the 27th, he's indicated that the past 2 weeks had been fine, had been good. Prior to that, things were, Mollie was hurt. Mollie was not happy after she found out that he had been talking to this other girl. However, the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Dalton said that they were doing good again.
Okay. So you confronted him about the information with Jordan Lamb, right?
Right. Yes.
And that was important to get his response for your investigation, right?
Right. Trying to figure out why we hadn't talked about this earlier. Yes.
And what was Mr. Jack's response to that?
Well, I asked him.
Again, I'm going to object as hearsay.
Again, non-hearsay purpose, Your Honor.
I'm sorry,
Clearly.
I did not hear that.
Non-hearsay purpose.
Can we approach, please?
Yes.
Judge, our objection stands.
And the objection is hearsay, correct?
Correct.
Sustained.
I'd like to make a record then, Your Honor.
Why don't you approach again? Members of the jury, we will take a 10-minute recess at this time. Want to remind you of your admonition. You can leave your notebooks where they are, and Carrie will let you know as soon as you can leave.
You guys are good to go.
Please be seated, everyone. Outside the presence of the jury, Mr. George, just to confirm for the record, you're still under oath. Mr. Freeze, you had record you wish to make.
Your Honor, we wish to make an offer of proof at this point in time of this regarding the objection that was just made. And this will begin the offer of proof. Mr. George, Dalton Jack and you spoke about his relationship with Jordan Lamb, correct?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Jack tell you regarding his relationship with Jordan Lamb?
He told me that some time ago, I don't remember if it was a number of months or years, he had had a sexual relationship with her, I believe, one time. And then fast forward to more recent times, around the time of Mollie's disappearance, maybe months leading up to that, they were engaged in sexting conversations to where she would send him pictures and they would talk sexually over the phone, things of that nature.
Did he tell you those times of sexting over the phone occurred in April of 2018?
If he told me that, I'd like to think I reflected that in the report, but I don't remember for sure.
Did he tell you that Mollie found out about that?
Yes,
And did he tell you how Mollie found out about that?
he did.
What did he say about that?
Well, he told me that when he was engaged in the conversations with, did you say Jordan?
Yes.
Yes. He had led her to believe that he and Mollie were no longer seeing each other, and she found out that wasn't the case, so Jordan got upset and notified Mollie what had been going on. So that's the way Mollie found out about it, through Jordan.
Did he indicate to you that Mollie knew that he and Jordan had sexual relations?
He told me that she was not aware of that.
And did he tell you what Mollie would have done if she knew that he and Jordan had sexual relations?
Yes.
What was that?
Would have left him.
Did he ever tell you that Mollie had forgiven him for having sexual relations with Jordan Lamb?
I don't think she knew that he had sexual relationships with her.
So if Mr. Dalton Jack would have testified in open court that Mollie had known he had sex with Jordan Lamb and forgiven him for it, that would be inconsistent with what he told you on July 27th?
Yes.
Did Dalton Jack in his statement to you indicate that 1 or 2 months ago, prior to the interview, he had an online relationship with Jordan Lamb?
Yeah, that's the sexting conversation that I'm referring to.
Did he tell you he had received pictures of Jordan Lamb in her underwear?
Yes.
If he testified here in open court that he had no recollection of that conversation with Jordan Lamb, that would be inconsistent with what he told you?
Yes.
Did Dalton Jack tell you that he told Jordan Lamb that he and Mollie Tibbetts were no longer seeing each other?
Yes.
And if he testified here in open court that he didn't recall making those statements to Jordan Lamb, would that be inconsistent with what he told you?
Yes.
If Dalton Jack told you, or strike that, did Dalton Jack tell you that Jordan Lamb found out that he and Mollie Tibbetts were still together, she got mad and sent Mollie Tibbetts screenshots of the sexual conversations?
Yes.
If he testified in open court he had no recollection of doing that or that happening, that would be inconsistent with what he told you.
Yes.
That would end my offer of proof, Your Honor. I would suggest to the court, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown may have something.
Anything, Mr. Brown?
Judge, it's my understanding on an offer of proof, that's what this is. Our objection would stand. Much of what Mr. Freeze has brought up was not asked of Dalton Jack. He did admit some of it, if not all of it, whenever he was testifying. So he's pulling out some detailed statements, but it's hearsay. That's, I mean, some of it's double hearsay. Some of it's what Mollie told somebody that told somebody, what Jordan told somebody. It's confusing, it's hearsay, and we would object.
All right. Anything else you want to say, Mr. Freeze?
Yes, Your Honor. It's pursuant to 5613B is extrinsic evidence of prior inconsistent statement of Mr. Jack. If he said he had no recollection of this, or Agent George here can certainly testify that Mr. Jack's recollection was clear on that day. Yesterday, he didn't recall the April 9th conversation that he supposedly had with Mollie Tibbetts, he testified clearly that Mollie, first of all, knew that they had sex. That's clear as a bell from yesterday's testimony, and she had forgiven him. This is completely contradictory, is completely allowable under the rules, and it's very important for Mr. Bahena's defense.
So, Mr. Freeze, so the record's clear, you're asking that this be offered for impeachment purposes?
Yes. And also, it should be allowed as part of Mr. George's investigation as the effect on the listener.
All right. I'll give you some direction and rule on this prior to the jury being brought back in. Thank you. Recess.